Alright then gang, so in our app so far, currently we're just serving static HTML files back to the browser. And by static, I mean all of the content is predefined and it doesn't change. Now sometimes we want to inject some kind of dynamic data into our resulting HTML. For example, that could be data from a database like blog posts, or it could be user data that we want to show on a profile page. So how would we output dynamic content or data in these kind of templates? Well, to do that, we can use something called a view engine or a template engine. And this is something that Express apps can use really easily. So it's another massive advantage of using Express to build Node websites. So view engines let us write HTML templates very similar to this in an HTML syntax, but also allow us to inject dynamic data and logic into them, like variables, if checks, loops. And then we can serve the resulting HTML page with that data to the browser. So there's a few different options that we can go for when we're choosing a templating engine. We could use something like Express handlebars, which is quite popular. Also something like Pug, which is really quite different from HTML actually, so we're not going to go with that. Or something like EJS, which comes with a lot of nice features and it's really simple. So this is the one that we're going to be using going forward in this tutorial. So then my friends, the first thing we need to do is install EJS so that we can use it. So I'm going to cancel out of this process, then say npm install EJS, and that should save it to our dependencies over in package.json right here, EJS, we can see that. Okay, and now we have to say we want to use EJS as our view engine of choice for this application. So we do that at the top after we've created the Express app. So I'm going to do a little comment here that says register view engine. And to do that, we use app.set, and app.set lets us configure some application settings. And one of those settings is the view engine that it uses, and we're going to use the EJS view engine. So now it knows that EJS is going to be used to create our templates. Now then, we need a place to create our different EJS views. Now automatically, Express and EJS is going to look in the views folder for those. So that's the default value of where it's going to look. So if we place all of our EJS files in here, we don't need to do any more configuration. However, if you want to create a different folder called something else, then you can tell Express what that folder is going to be called by going down here and saying app.set and using a different configuration setting called views. And then the second argument is going to be the name of the folder where you will keep your views. For example, my views, and now Express would know to find your views in here and it would look in here instead of just views. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to place all of my views inside this folder right here. So how do we create these views? They're very similar to HTML, but they have a different extension. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually delete all of these three files. I don't want plain HTML anymore. And instead, I'm going to create an index.ejs view like this. So all I'm going to do inside this view is just paste some HTML, and this is pure HTML. There is no EJS specific code here. It's just like having an HTML file, exactly the same. So you can see we've got a head right here with a title, and inside the body we have a nav, and that nav has two parts. It has the site title on the left, and it has a UL, which is the nav on the right. Now, the reason I've given these classes is because later on we're going to style these a little bit. So inside this site title, we have an anchor tag, which goes to the home page, and there's an H1 inside that, and this is Blog Ninja. Now, we also have a paragraph tag under that says this is a Net Ninja site. I realise that's very egotistical of me, but nonetheless, below that we have a nav right here, and there's three links. There's one to the home page, which is ultimately where we're going to show all of our blogs. There's one to the about page, and there's one to a new page which we've not yet seen and we've not yet created or configured, and that's going to be to a form page to create a new blog. So that will be /blogs/create. Okay? So that's the nav done right there. And then under that, we have this div right here with a class of blogs and also a class of content again, so we can style this later on. and then finally an H2 inside that says all blogs. So ultimately, all of our blogs are going to go underneath here, and that's going to be the dynamic stuff that we do in this template file later on. For now, let me just save this and show you how we actually serve this up to a browser as a response. So if we go back to app.js, no longer inside the home route handler right here do we want to send this file. Instead, we want to do what's known as render a view. So I need to replace that with the render method. This is how we take a view, render it, and send it back to the browser. And all we need to do is say what this view is called minus the extension. Well, this one is called index. So that's all I need to do. I need to just say response.render index. And now Express is going to look inside this folder, this views folder automatically. It's going to find this. It's going to use the EJS view engine to render that and send it back to the browser. So let's see if this works. I'm going to first of all open up my terminal and say nodemon app to run this. And then I'm going to go to the browser and go to the home page, and we should get that template, which we do. Now then, let's do the other files. We need one for about and also one for the 404, and then we'll create that create page as well, where we're going to have a form to create a new blog. So then, let's first of all do about.ejs, and in here, again, I'm just going to copy this code and paste it in, because I know you probably don't want to see me type out HTML. This is not an HTML course, but again, it has the same head with a same title, and it also has exactly the same nav here with links to the home, /about, and then /blogs create. And then finally, for the content of this page, it's just a div with the class of about and content, an H2 and some lorem ipsum right here. So that's the about page, and everything is identical to, the index page. All of this is identical. The only thing different is the actual content at the bottom. So let's save that. We also need our 404 page. So let's do 404.ejs. And again, I'm going to paste this in. Again, this is pretty much identical to the other two pages. All of this is the same, but we have this div at the bottom with a class of not found and content, and we have this message in the middle. Now notice all of these divs, they all have a class of content. This one does, and this one does right here. And that's just so we can style them all the same way with one single CSS selector later on. All right, so we have those 3 pages done. Let's go and render those right here. So instead of this, we can say response.render, and we're going to render this time the about view. And then down here at the bottom, instead of all this, we want to take that off. We're going to keep the status because we still want to set that to 404, but then we can say .render, and we want to render the 404 view. So let me just test this out. Come over here to the browser, and let's try clicking these links. If we go to about, then it takes us to the about page. If we go to another URL that doesn't exist, then we get the page not found. This one still doesn't exist yet either, the /blogs/create URL, because first of all, we've not created a handler function for that, and secondly, we don't have a view for it either. So let's create a handler function for it first of all, and I'll do that just above the redirects. So in fact, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this redirect because we really don't need it in our application anymore. And let's say instead app.get, the URL is /blogs/create, and this is going to fire a function. We're taking the request and the response object, and inside here all we want to do is render something. So we say response.render. Now we need to create the EJS file to render, so let's do that. New file, and we're going to call this create.ejs. And then once more, I'm just going to copy and paste this into this file. Dead simple form. Again, all of this is the same. We have the head, the title, the nav at the top, exactly the same as the other pages. The only thing different is this over here. We still have a class of content, but also create blog. Then we have a form, and it's dead simple. We have a label for title and an input for the title of the blog. We have a label for a blog snippet, which is just kind of like a preview of the blog, if you like, a sentence or something. And we have an input for the snippet. And then we have a label for the body and a text area for the body as well, the actual content of the blog. And then at the bottom, we have a button to submit the form. So there's no kind of functionality to this form at the minute. We're just purely outputting it to the screen and nothing's going to work with it. But we have this form ready for later, so we can add functionality to it then. For now, let's just worry about hooking this up so that when we go to /blogs/create, we render this, and we can do that over here by saying inside the render method, we want to send back the create view. All right, so let's give this a whirl. So /blogs/create, click on that, and now we get this form. So now all of these links work. And how simple was that? This is how simple it is to create EJS files, which is pretty much just HTML at the minute, and then render those right here. And that's easier than using that send file method and specifying a route. This way we don't have to do any of that because it automatically looks in this views folder for us. Now, I know you might be sitting there thinking, well, actually, it's pretty pointless because we're not actually doing anything different yet. This is just raw HTML. But the power of EJS and other templating engines come to life when we start to inject dynamic content, variables, and logic into these views. So then, now that we're using EJS templates, how do we actually create dynamic content inside these templates so it's not just all static stuff like this? Well, we use EJS tags and they look something like this. They're a bit like PHP tags. So we can do an open angle bracket and then we can do a percentage sign, and then we close them with a percentage sign and a close angle brackets. And then inside here now we could do some dynamic code. So for example, I can do any kind of JavaScript. I could say const and then name is equal to Mario, like so. Now this right here is going to run as JavaScript, but it's not going to run as JavaScript on the front end. It does that on the server, right? But now inside this template, we could output the name somewhere if we wanted to. So how do we output a value? Well, let's say, for example, I want to output it right at the top inside this div right here. Well, I could do a paragraph tag first of all, and if I want to output a value, again, I need my EJS tags. So angle bracket and then percentage angle bracket to close them. But when we're outputting a single value, we need to add an equal sign at the opening bracket just after the percentage sign. So when we're just doing code like this that's not being output to the screen, it doesn't matter, we don't need that. But when we're outputting a value to the screen, we need this equal sign right here. And then I could just output the name, which is this dynamic value right here. So let me save this and see if it works. I'm going to save and refresh over here, and now we can see this name. Okay, so we do dynamic code this way and we output a value this way. Now we don't want to actually do that. Instead, what we probably want to do is pass data from our app over here, because ultimately we probably communicate with a database, get some data, and then we want to pass that data inside this view right here so we can then output it. So how do we do that kind of thing? Well, we'll skip the database bit for now because we've not covered that yet. Instead, I'll just show you how to pass data from our handler into a view. So say, for example, I want to output a dynamic value inside the title tag, and that's going to be the title of the page. Well, I could do that by passing through data as a second parameter inside this render method, and that parameter is just an object. Now, this object is ultimately going to get sent into this EJS file that we render right here. And we can access, therefore, any of the properties directly from this object inside this file and output them. So, say, for example, I want a title property, and you can call it what you want. It doesn't have to be called title. But say I want a title property, which is going to be home. Then this object is being passed into this file right here. So then we can access that property title inside this file, and I'm going to output it right here. So let me do a pipe symbol first of all, and then to output a variable, remember, we do angle bracket percentage equals, and then the variable name. Well, in our case, it's the title. We don't have to reference the object first, we just reference this directly, and then we close our percentage and angle bracket, and that is it. It's going to grab whatever value we pass through and output it right here instead. So let's just preview that, and the title, by the way, is this thing at the top. So if I refresh now, we can see now that title at the top, and that's been output. Cool. So let's do this for each page. Let me open up these other pages, 404, about, and also create. And then if we go down here, we need a title for each one of these where we render. So let's just paste these in and then come back to them. Paste and paste. Okay, so the title for this is not going to be home. It's going to be about. The next one is going to be create a new blog. And this last one is just going to be 404. So 404. Now we need to output the title in each one of these. So let me copy that and paste it right here. Save it, and right here and save it. Tedious, I know, but we're getting there. All right, done. So now if I preview this in a browser, we should see the correct titles at the top of every single page. And if we go to 404, then we should get that as well. Awesome. So there we go. That's the basics of how we can pass data into a view and how we can then access that data inside the view. But we can do more things inside EJS. For example, say on the homepage over here, if I want to pass through some blogs, some dynamic data, it could be an array of blogs. Then inside the index page, I want to cycle through that array and output a bit of HTML template for each item in that array to display those blogs on a page. Well, I can do that in EJS as well. So let me close off these dudes right now. And over here, let's now create some blogs. Now, I'm just going to copy and paste this from my GitHub repo, paste it in right there. And this constant blogs is just an array. And inside we have 3 elements. Each one is an object and it is a separate blog. Not very interesting blogs nonetheless. So they only have at the minute a title and a snippet. And that's all we're going to output for now. But later on we will output the body as well. So let's first of all pass this into this object. So I could say blogs is going to be equal to the blogs above. Now, because this and this are called the same thing, I can shorten this just to blogs and it automatically assigns this value to this property then, okay? So now we can access this blogs property inside the index. Let's go ahead and do that so we can output them. So we're going to output them down here underneath the H2. And the first thing I actually want to do is check, is the length of the blogs over 0? Are there any blogs available to us? Because I only want to try and cycle through them if there are blogs available. If this was empty like that, I wouldn't want to try and cycle through them. Makes sense? So we need to do an if check in here, and we do that just the same way we do it in JavaScript. So first of all, remember, we open up our angle brackets, percentage. We don't need the equal sign right here because we're just doing some generic JavaScript logic, not outputting a variable yet. And inside here, I'm going to say if and blogs.length. Remember, we can access blogs because we pass it through, and the length property is a property on an array. If that is greater than 0, then we're going to do something. Now, we need to close off our EJS brackets right here because now we're going to output some template. So I'm going to output an H3 and also a P tag. So the title is going to go in here and the snippet is going to go in here. But before I do that, I want to close off this if block. So I can do it at the bottom over here. So angle brackets, percentage, and then close off the if block, and then close off the EJS tags, right? So we do our opening if right here, and then we close it off at the bottom. In between, we have our template. So now only if the length of blogs is over 0 is it going to output this template. If it's empty, it's not going to do that. Now, in actual fact, we don't want to just output one H3 and one paragraph tag, right? Because we might have 3. So in actual fact, inside this if block right here, we want to cycle through the blogs first of all and output this for each blog. So I'm going to actually cut that, and instead I'm now going to do some more code, and that is going to be inside the EJS tags first of all, and I'm going to say blogs.forEach. That's a method we can use on arrays, and it's going to cycle through them. So for each blog, it's going to fire a callback function, and we take that blog in to the function. Now, this right here, I need to get rid of, and I need to close my EJS tags because this is where I'm going to output the template right here. And then I'm going to close off the for each by doing closing angle bracket and then close in parentheses like so, close off our EJS tags as well. So I hope this makes sense. It might look a little complex at first, but you will get the hang of it. Just know that we open up our JavaScript statements at the top, and if they need closing off, we do that again at the bottom in EJS tags both times. So first of all, we're checking if the length of blogs is over 0. If it is, then we're cycling through the blogs and we're firing a callback function for each blog. And we take in that individual blog at a time. So the first time around, it's going to be this one at the top, then this one, then this one. So it's going to cycle through those, and we're going to output an H3 and a paragraph tag in each case for each blog. And we have access now to that variable down here. We can output that. So I'm first of all going to give this a class of title so we can style it later on. So class equals title, and then this a class equal to snippet. And then inside the title, I'm going to output a variable. So we want to do an equal sign inside our EJS tags this time. That's what we do when we're outputting a dynamic variable. And then I'm going to say I want to take the blog that we have access to and get the title property from that. Remember, they have a title property and a snippet. So underneath that, I want to output the snippet. So I'm going to copy and paste this dude right here, and I'm going to change title to snippet. And now this should work. So let's test this out. I'm going to go over here and refresh. I'm going to cross my fingers as well to hope this works. And it does. We have now these 3 blogs. So that's the title, snippet, title, snippet. And if we inspect this, we should see, oops, not that. We want to inspect it in the console. We should see that we get an H3 for each one and a paragraph tag, H3 paragraph, right? So for each blog, we're outputting this bit of template. And that's really cool. We couldn't as easily have done that in HTML. Instead, we would have had to send back raw HTML and then on the front end, maybe access the data and then dynamically render content that way. But this is a bit easier doing it this way, right? So now we're cycling through the blogs if there are any and outputting those. But what if there aren't any? Well, let's now make this empty and save it. Come back over here and refresh, and we don't see anything. So maybe what we should do is add an else case to this if statement right here. And if there's no blogs, we can output a message like there's no blogs to display. So where we close off the if statement, I'm going to say else and then open that up. And then down here, I'm going to close that else block inside EJS tags like so. And then I'll just do a paragraph tag inside, which says there are no blogs to display. All right, so let me save that and refresh over here. And now we can see there are no blogs to display, but as soon as we have data inside the blogs again, then it's going to get rid of that and show the blogs instead. Awesome. So that's pretty simple, right? That's how we can pass data through into a view and how we can output that data, and also just use vanilla JavaScript inside these EJS tags to add additional logic as well, like if statements, loops, etc. So we're now creating dynamic EJS templates with variables and logic inside them, but how does this all work? Well, our view files live on the server, and when we want to render one to the browser, that view file is passed into the view engine, the EJS view engine, to be processed. Now, the engine looks for any kind of dynamic content, variables, loops, conditionals, etc. Then, whenever it finds those, it figures out the resulting HTML code for those parts, and in the end, it spits out a valid HTML page based on the template we wrote. And then that HTML page with the resulting data inside it will be returned to the browser. So this whole process is called server-side rendering. Okay then, so if we look at our different views at the minute, all 4 of them have a lot of the same content. They all have this nav, for example, which is identical on every single one of these views. Now, that's not really efficient, because if we then changed the nav in the future to add different links or change the links, then we'd have to go through every single view we had, and that could be above 10, it could be 20, it could be even 30, and we'd have to change that nav in each and every single view. So it would be nice to be able to create a file which held just this part of the template, which is the same, and then we can import this into our views where we need to, because then if we need to update that part of the template in the future, we just have that one file to update instead of all the individual views. Now, fortunately, we can do this with Express and EJS, and those files that we make are called partials or partial templates. They're basically parts of a template that can be reused in different views. So what I'm going to do is create a folder over here, and I'm going to call that partials, and then we'll create all of our partial files in here. Now we're going to have one for the nav, we're also going to have one for the head, and we're going to create a footer as well that we can place at the bottom of every file too. So let me first of all create a new file, and I'm going to call this nav.ejs. They have the same extension, they're still just EJS files. I'm also going to create a new one called head.ejs. We're going to put the head content in that and create a new one called footer.ejs too. Okay, so first of all the nav, let's go to the index page and grab that nav, cut it from there, and then go to the nav file if we can find it and paste it in here, and that's all there is to it. So this nav partial right here now contains this HTML, and all we want to do is use that right here in this possession in this view file. So the way we do that is by using an include function, and we have to do this inside EJS tags. So open up your angle bracket percentage and then close that off as well, and then this time we need to do a minus sign or hyphen at the end. So I'll explain that in a second, but then we say include, which is a function, and then we need to pass through a relative path to this function, and that relative path is to the file we want to include right here, which is this nav. So // to say the same directory, then into partials, then we want the nav.ejs file. So we're outputting a value right here, yeah? And why didn't I use the equal sign instead? Well, when we use the equal sign, it escapes special characters and we end up with a string value instead of raw HTML. Now, this minus sign doesn't do that. So whenever we use include, we use this minus sign to output that value instead. So now if we save that and go to the home page over here, if we refresh, there shouldn't be a change, but it looks like there's going to be an error. Let me go over here and open up this terminal. Now we don't seem to be running the app, so I'm going to say nodemon app like so, and hopefully this should work now. So if we refresh over here, now we get it, and this nav is still there. Everything still works. So what we can do now is just copy this and go through our different view files, and where we see the nav, get rid of that and instead replace it with this include statement like so. And this way now, if we are updating this nav at any point, we don't need to update it in 4 different files. We only need to update it once right here. So let me save that again and refresh to make sure everything's still working on all of these pages, which it is. The nav is still there. Awesome. So I also want to flesh out the head as well as the nav. So what I'm going to do is go to the index, and I'm going to grab this whole head right here and cut it, and I'm going to paste it inside the head file like so. Now we just need to include it. So let me grab this and paste it up here inside the HTML file. So now we want to include the head instead of the nav. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go to the other files at the top and replace the head with this include statement instead. Save that, and the same for 404, and we'll save that one. And then finally we want to do the same with create and save that. Okay, so that's the head done, and then finally we want to do this footer. Now we haven't actually created the footer yet, so let's flesh this out from scratch. It's going to be dead simple. I'm just going to do a footer tag, which is a valid HTML tag, and then inside I just want some kind of HTML copyright notice. So I'm going to say copyright, and then I'm going to use the code for the copyright symbol. So ampersand first of all, then copy, and then the semicolon, and then I'm going to say blog Ninja 2020. So all this does is put out the copyright symbol in the browser. So I'm going to save that, and then we need to include it. So let me grab this, copy it and paste it at the bottom because I'm super lazy, and change this to footer like so. And then I'm going to copy this dude and go to the 404 and paste it in there, save it, and go to about. We'll do it in there as well. And then finally on the index page at the bottom too, save that. And now if we come over here and refresh, we should see the footer as well, which we do, and it's going to be on all of the other pages too. And even the 404 should work. Yep, we can see that footer at the bottom and the nav, and the head is still there as well. Awesome. So that is how we create partial templates with EJS. Okay then my friends, so there's only one more thing I really want to do inside this lesson, and that's just to add a little bit of CSS so that our web pages don't look so crappy. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, get rid of these EJS files, because all of the CSS is going to go inside of the head, because we're going to use it on every page. It makes sense to do it here. So I'm going to do a style tag, first of all, and then I'm just going to paste in these styles. They can all be found on my GitHub repo. Remember, the link to that is down below, and it's on the lesson 7 branch. You're going to find this CSS inside this file, the head.ejs file. So I'm going to paste this in. I will quickly go through it because there's a little bit here. The first thing I've done is an input right here, and that is importing a font that I wanted to use called Noto or Noto Serif, and I got that from Google Fonts right here. So when you select a font in Google Fonts, you can then get this import right here, and it gives you that URL. Okay, so for example, if I want to select this style right here and this one, and then I go to embed, you can get the import right here by clicking on import and then just grabbing that. That's all I've done, and I've pasted it right here so we can use that font in our project. Now the body right here, we've given it a max width of 1200 pixels, margin 20 pixels top and bottom, auto left and right, meaning that this 1200 pixel column is going to sit in the middle, and margin is automatically going to be applied left and right to equal that out. It centers the content. Bit of padding, then a font family, which is this thing, and then a max width as well, which we don't need because we already did that right here. So let me get rid of that. Then we do a bit of a reset on these different things right here, P, H1, H2, etc. We strip away the margin and padding and the text decoration and give them a color of a dark gray. We use a bit of flex on the nav so that the content spaces between, so that one will sit on the left, the title, and the nav will sit on the right. We give it a bit of margin, border, and text transform. The UL itself, which is inside the nav, we display that as flex so that the different links sit next to each other. And we justify the content space between, so there's a gap between each different link. And we align the items to flex end, meaning they're going to sit way over on the right. Incidentally, if you want to learn about Flexbox and what all this means, this is not the tutorial series to do that. I've got a whole series on Flexbox, so I'll leave the link to that down below so you can see it. Anyway, carrying on, we have the LI, where we strip out the list style type and give it a bit of margin. The H1, we increase the font size. The nav P and the nav A, we just give it a color and a font weight. The footer again, color, align the text to the center, a bit of margin. And the H2, again, a bit of a margin. H3, just some simple styles here. The content, this is the stuff right here. So if we go to a page and we see this is the content div, and it's on every single page where the content is. So all we're doing is giving that a bit of a margin to the left. And then for each individual page, we've created these classes. So for the index, we don't have any unique styles we need to apply yet. All the details, we don't have that page yet. The create styles are right here. That's the form. So all we're doing is styling the form up a little bit to give it a max width of 400 pixels, applying this margin so it sits in the middle. We're styling the inputs and the text area to give them a bit of margin, padding, and a width. The labels, display block, bit of margin. Text area, 120 pixels in height because automatically they're a bit smaller than that, a bit shallower. And then finally, the button, we're making this a kind of reddy color, crimson, text color of white, a bit of padding, a border, font size of 1.2 ems, which is slightly bigger than the default, and then the cursor pointer, which is a little finger when you hover over the button, so users know to click it. Whew. Okay, so that is the CSS. Again, apologies if I've rushed through this, but this is really not a CSS course and I did not want to bore you with it. So let's go over here and see how this looks inside the browser. Let me refresh and ta-da! This looks automatically better. Let me just zoom out a little bit. Okay, so it looks pretty true to size. And there we go, there's the title. Remember, if we click on that, then it goes to the homepage. This is the homepage, and that's where we cycle through the different blogs, remember, inside the index right here. We have a link for that right here, about. This is the about page, and new blog. And there is the form, and now everything looks a little bit nicer. So feel free to work on this CSS, add your own styles, and if you create a design which is better than mine, which is probably not hard to do at all, then definitely, leave your styles down below and other people can use those as well. So there we go. Now we have this Express app set up, and we're now using views and injecting dynamic content into those views. Now, ultimately, I want to get all of these styles right here and I want to place them in a separate style sheet. But right now, we can't really do that. We will do that later on. But in order to do that, we need to talk about serving static files like CSS files and images and using middleware. So we're going to take a deep dive into that in the next lesson.